This is Gone at 21, Katelyn Markham's Death Investigation, Introduction Number 2. I'm your host, Jay Ryan. Before we get started with the podcast, I wanted to warn you that this recording has some disturbing content, discussions of human remains and the way the remains are treated, and it may be too graphic for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
State police have confirmed the skeletal remains found in Franklin County belong to Katelyn Markham. Right, friends and family of Katelyn Markham know she won't be coming home.
My gut is it's, not a natural death. It's just not natural for anybody to end up in that site. It's not an accident.
So, Katelyn's remains were found. Her skeletal remains were found in Cedar Grove, Indiana, off of Big Cedar Road, in an illegal trash dump. Local resident Andy Hicks and his wife Natalie were searching the area for scrap metal and found Katelyn instead. Andy found what he identified as a human jawbone. He placed it in a tree and called police. While waiting for the police, Natalie found Katelyn's skull and hair in a plastic grocery bag. The rest of the bones that were actually found were near the skull, some of which were under a landscape tarp. Katelyn's remains were found just 15 feet from the road. Now, that brings me to ask a question. Why was she there so long without being discovered earlier? Well, Big Cedar Road is a desolate two-lane country road. The side of the road Katelyn was found on, you have trees and a creek. The grassy shoulder of the road is only a few feet wide, then it drops. The hill separates the shoulder of the road from the creek bed. The actual creek is approximately 50 to 60 feet from Katelyn's final resting place. So, from the road, you can't see the dump. You would have to walk to the edge of the shoulder and look down the hill to see the site. You're not just going to stumble across it, especially at night. You would have to know it was there. I've been to Big Cedar Road twice, and it would be very easy for someone to dump a body undetected. It's a quick drop-off, and there isn't much activity on the road. But I counted numerous places on both trips from Fairfield to Cedar Grove that were just as isolated and easy to access. So why drive 35 to 40 minutes to dump a body? The person or people who dumped Katelyn in that trash were very familiar with that area and knew the site existed. When in the state of stress, you go to familiar places. The Indiana State Police joined the investigation 20 months after Katelyn went missing. The detective assigned to the case, Vance Patton, shares his initial thoughts and observations of the scene. Please excuse the audio quality. The interviews for this introduction were done on cell phones and the reception was not that great.
There was an obvious dump site. Somebody threw a bunch of, it looked like maybe garage, just rubbish, not really household trash, but there was a couple trash cans down there, a bunch of black plastic, what I described as landscape plastic, assortment, tires, rims, just junk from looked like a garage, and the bones. Some of them were underneath some plastic, but not didn't look like they tried to conceal her at all. Looks like they just threw her down there pretty haphazardly. It was probably 15 feet from the roadway, very hard to see from the roadway until you got over the bank, and probably another 60 feet to the creek, the Cedar Creek. The skull, there was actually a jawbone that the guy that was located the bones, he put it into a small sapling tree next to the body. So the skull was in a plastic grocery bag, and it was laying. I think he actually looked at it, and once he realized what it was, he put it back down. So it was still with the remains, but it was on top of everything.
Remember just before that clip I made the comment, you're not going to just stumble across that trash dump, especially at night? Well, I asked Vance Patton about that, if he thought that the perpetrator or perpetrators knew and were familiar with that area and that dump site. You would have to be familiar with that dump site, is that correct?
I do believe that. It don't make sense to me why they would, travel that far. I believe it was 35 minutes just driving normal, and there's plenty of other sites between Fairfield and Big Cedar there in Indiana that would have been just as remote, difficult to find. I don't know that, and that's one question I'd like to find when we discover the person that dumped her body there.
Back in Fairfield, Katelyn's father, David Markham, got a call from Fairfield Detective Rebecca Irvin, who told him about the discovery, but stopped short of telling him it was Katelyn. That happened a couple days later, when a father's worst nightmare came true.
We got a call from Detective Irvin of Fairfield Police Department saying that the remains of a person, of a human, were found in Indiana, and they weren't sure, but they were going to, they needed to do DNA and verify who it was. They did say it appeared to be a female. They didn't really want to tell me, but they kind of, said we might suspect it's Katelyn. And I'm not sure why they would have just, said that. They, other than the fact that maybe the location of where she was found, in regards to Carter property out in Indiana. But, I had a sinking feeling that was her. And she was identified by her dental records, and a couple of days later, got a knock on the door from the detective and the town chaplain and a couple of others, and I knew that what they were coming to tell me.
Going back to Indiana and the discovery, why would Katelyn's head be placed in a plastic bag? I know of several reasons why a plastic bag would be placed over a victim's head. It doesn't always mean suffocation. The victim sometimes is already deceased when the bag is placed. Here's Detective Patton to explain.
Well, there's several things. What we theorize is, possibly one thing is an overdose. You get a foam cone, we call it, and they'll foam from the mouth, and people a lot of times don't like to see that. They'll cover it up. The other theory is, if it was somebody that was well acquainted with her, didn't want to see her face, or another theory could be blood. Don't want to get blood in the car. Numerous things. Don't believe that that was the cause of death. The bag tied too tightly. we don't believe that was, but almost a concealment.
This discovery had to have hit David Markham hard. His daughter would not be coming home. Dave describes the emotions he felt when the news came that confirmed the bones in Indiana were those of his daughter, Katelyn.
Well, of course, it was, I knew there was going to be a tragic ending, but you're still got that 1% of hope that maybe she still is alive and she's going to come walking home. And besides the overwhelming grief, there was a bit of relief that she's found and she's home, and that anybody who, because people would say from the get-go, well, maybe she just got tired, maybe she just walked away, maybe she's had enough, and those people used to make me so angry because I knew better. She was 3 weeks away from graduating and 2 days away from her birthday, and she wasn't going to give up. So where she was identified, kind of put that story to bed. Nobody gets to ever say that again. She was ruled a homicide. Not sure, the method of how, but she was ruled a homicide.
Katelyn's remains were not fully recovered. Approximately a year later, more of her remains were found several yards from where the original discovery took place. Here's Vance Patton with an explanation of why Katelyn's bones may have been scattered.
We recovered probably 80% of the larger bones. There was a couple bones that weren't, and part of that reason could be animals, rodents, anything dragging them. You got coyotes, raccoons, possums, and dragging them off. There was some small finger bones that were found that, I think probably just, we went over that thing for a couple days, and just things that were missed because they were so small. But the animals dragging them off would probably be the biggest reason that I would think of on that.
Wanda Lee, the Franklin County, Indiana medical examiner, told me early on in my investigation that the scattering of bones were consistent with animal activity. She also said the creek water and freeze and thaw patterns can also play a role in the scattering of bones. A couple of local residents, including Andy Hicks, the man who found Katelyn, told me that the creek hasn't been up that high, referring to the spot where they found Katelyn, in over a decade. In my investigative opinion, the cause of the bones being scattered is that of animal activity. A large bone was found near the creek, and the freeze-thaw patterns of the 2 winters would not have carried that large bone that far without help. I also wanted to add this comment due to some rumors about Katelyn's death. The medical examiner told me there is no signs that Katelyn was dismembered. Those rumors are simply not true. After the initial investigation, I wondered what steps were taken by the Indiana State Police to investigate the case in the months just after Katelyn was found. I asked Detective Vance Patton.
One of the things we did, the dump site, since it wasn't real visible from the road, almost made us believe that that could possibly have been somebody that was acquainted with it that maybe had something to do with Katelyn's disappearance or death. And so we went back and was able to find some evidence that linked it to a family. We went and talked to them, sort of ruled them out. It was several years before, probably 4 years before Katelyn even went missing, where that was dumped. Some other things, we looked at the area as far as who would have traveled out in that area, pretty desolate area. Why she was that far from her house, stuff like that. Interviews, I would have to say, half a dozen. Polygraphs, I can remember 2 that the state police have done.
After hearing of the interviews and polygraphs, I wondered if any suspicious statements were made that would lead Detective Patton to have some doubts about a particular person. So I asked.
There was a comment. I really don't want to say who it is, but there was a comment. I just asked a theory. What's your theory on this? And I was told that they believed that it was an accident, and which sort of strikes me. If you have a family member, a loved one, whatever, and here we find the bones a year and a half later, how you can describe that as being probably an accident. And that really sort of raised my eyebrows on that answer.
Let's face it, whoever dumped Katelyn's body had no respect for it, nor did they have respect for her life. She was tossed out like a piece of trash. Who would do that? Why would they do that? That concludes the introduction series for Gone at 21. Episode 1 will be coming out in a couple weeks. For updates, please check the Gone at 21 Facebook page or check out the podcast feed in iTunes or Stitcher. If you want to hear this podcast on a weekly basis, please support this podcast by going to Gone at 21 Facebook page. There you will find a GoFundMe page pinned to the top of the wall. Click the link and any amount will be appreciated. If you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, rate, and share and review in iTunes and Stitcher. This helps the podcast's positioning in the directory. That would not only help the podcast, but it also helps Katelyn's case. Evidentiary notes will be coming out next Wednesday. Until next time, I'm Jay Ryan. Take care.